Hello, you're listening to Wine Blast, the podcast that brings wine to life with a smile. And I'm here, as ever, with my husband and fellow Master of Wine, Peter Richards. But in this episode, we're actually stepping into non-wine territory.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a Master of non-wines there. And it certainly isn't us, even if there is. Well, we're going to have to do, though, because in this episode, we're going to be looking at alternatives to wine. Is that a heretical thought?
We are indeed.
What to drink as wine lovers when we want time off the booze. I know we're a bit late to dry January, but I have to say that's almost on purpose.
Yeah, it is really.
Because we're not great believers in dry January. It might not come as a surprise.
No surprise
but
there.
we are going to go into the reasons. There are reasons for that. We're going to go into that, but I think a bit later on.
Yeah. So what really spurred us on to look into this was a question from our listener, John, and that was as follows.
Hi, Susie and Peter. It's John here. Really enjoying the podcast. I love wine, and the better quality wine I buy, the more I tend to drink. And I wondered whether you've got any hints and tips for actually drinking less, particularly during these COVID times when it's all too easy to drink more than you intended. Anyway, any thoughts? Much appreciated. Cheers. Bye.
It's a great question. Thanks so much, John. And thanks also for tuning in. I think buying expensive wine can go one of two ways, can't it? Funny enough, a lot of people would say you naturally tend to drink less when it's more expensive, wouldn't they? I think because it's a bit more maybe reverential. Yeah. You tend to take your time a bit more over it when it's more expensive. So, John, maybe there's an argument to going even more expensive, like eye-wateringly expensive. So you definitely do slow down.
This is not the right way to go.
Big, go big. No? Okay.
Equally though, as wine lovers, it's quite understandable wanting to drink more good quality stuff, especially right now when things are hard, as you say, John, and we all need a bit of escapism, a morale boost. Anyway, so what are our hints and tips for drinking less?
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to get into in this episode, aren't we? First up, I think what we're going to do is we're going to kind of spill the beans on our regime, aren't we? Now I say that, it sounds quite grand now that I say that. It's
we
not
do
really
something special.
It sounds fancy. It's just how we try and maintain a healthy balance, I guess, isn't it, really? And the reasons for doing what we do in that sense. We're also then going to hear from Stuart Elkington, founder of Dry Drinker, which is a fascinating story with some great tips in there too. We'll also be talking to a producer of no and low wine. Now, I should just say at this stage, we're going to use the term no and low, as in no and low alcohol, to mean sort of booze that's under 0.5% alcohol or less. It's a generic term, it's a general one, partly because there's so much terminology about this, excuse me, and it gets very confusing. So we're just going to say no and low alcohol for anything under 0.5%, which may be 0% as well. That said, lastly, I think we are going to do a little bit of tasting, aren't we?
We are indeed.
No and low options to try and recommend
some
things for hints and tips.
We are indeed. So lots to fit in. So I think we should get going. Now, our approach comes from a lot of trial and error, and of course our own personal experience. But we are people who are, let's face it, more exposed to booze than most. So I think it holds water.
Right, I'm going to take you back here. Do you remember doing, I think it was a whole month off the booze?
I
and
probably blanked that. Many years
Remember
ago.
is a loose term in our world, isn't it? But I think it was before any of this was trending. It was before Dry January even
existed.
existed.
Remember it, shouldn't I? By the whole month off booze.
Of all of your life, that should be the most clear memories. Anyway, we did it, and we were so kind of smug, weren't we, to kind of realise that actually it didn't make that much of a difference. Well, firstly, that we could do it.
Yeah, but well, I mean, that was a massive
and also,
surprise.
that it didn't actually make that much of a difference.
Yeah, but I mean, let's face it, that was pre-children. We were still young-ish, I think late 30s, maybe early 40s. Yeah. Then we had kids, became chronically sleep deprived, got a bit older, a bit more frayed around the edges, and really did start to notice the difference that overindulging, or by contrast, staying off the booze, had, didn't we? I mean, really.
I mean, totally. And I think that meant we started to take it seriously. In a way we hadn't probably before. I think sometimes when you're young, you can gloss over these things. So for us, and that looking at that period, then the key is quality of sleep more than anything, isn't it? I think we started to notice how alcohol really would affect our sleep. We'd feel far less refreshed in the morning, and therefore less able to deal with the kids or deal with each other. Frankly, probably more with you than me. And I think that was to do with alcohol kind of flattening the natural sleep curves, giving less refreshing deep sleep. So you just feel.
I mean, it's not all the time, and not definitely. You can't definitely put the two things together. But I think there is generally you do tend to sleep better if you haven't had any.
It's certainly
alcohol.
one of the areas we notice it most.
Yeah. Anyway, so we embarked actually, which was slightly related to this, on a couple of years ago now, on what we called our Drink Well, Eat Well project, and that looked into wine and drinks to go with different kinds of lifestyles and diets, whether it's vegan or vegetarian or so on. And one of the options that we looked into was the Mediterranean diet, and that threw up some pretty interesting kind of research.
Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating doing this. Essentially, the Mediterranean diet, which we all know, recommends wine as part of the overall healthy diet. But the
so we thought, woohoo!
Exactly, I had to look into this.
Fantastic.
But the key is not too much and very regular. So a small amount every day with a meal.
Yeah.
But as wine lovers, we wanted to know, well, what exactly does a small amount mean exactly? What's our maximum tolerance? So we talked to the Deutsche Wein Academy, didn't we? The experts there.
We did,
and they said what that means, a small amount means 1 to 2 glasses or units for women, or 2 to 3 glasses or units for men with meals. So what does that mean? Well,
we need to know because everybody's got different size glasses.
Glasses and units, it can be confusing. So for a wine at 14% alcohol, that's around 175 millilitres maximum for women and 250 millilitres maximum for men daily with meals.
Yeah, and if you're interested to know more, there is more information and background on all of that, including a short video on our website, susieandpeter.com. Just search for Drink Well, Eat Well. But essentially what we found, and this is, I think it's going to sound quite bizarre for a diet that recommends drinking wine every day, was that the Mediterranean diet was quite hard, wasn't it?
Yeah,
surprisingly so.
It was fine. But you needed fresh, good fresh ingredients, which is not easy to get when it's winter and you don't live in the Mediterranean on the one hand. And on the drinks front, more importantly, it just got a bit kind of monotonous, didn't it? You never really felt that you were allowed to enjoy yourself, let your hair down.
Measuring out our 175 mils.
Is really important to the human psyche. I think we kind of need that, actually, and that's important for our mental health. And also I'd add in there that our sleep patterns weren't always the best either, were they, with that?
Not really, no. Yeah, but equally, let's face it, the boom and bust approach, I think we all know just isn't that healthy, taking the week off booze to then go crazy at the weekend, which I think is quite a common approach.
Yeah.
And I think it's also why we don't really like dry January, because it tends to encourage that swing from abstinence to indulgence. And, frankly, it's at the bleakest time of year anyway.
Yeah, particularly this year with lockdown, which is why I think we've seen, in the press, haven't we, the reports of people giving up on dry January in record numbers this year.
Yeah.
And the stats from KAM Media via The Buyer, something like 15.7 million UK adults. That's about, I think, 30% of UK adults.
It's a lot, isn't it? Yeah.
Intended to do dry January this year, but nearly 5 million changed their mind before the 1st of January, and 2.7 million had given up by the 6th of January. Yeah. So that's quite a high attrition rate.
It is. And to be honest, you can understand the kind of boom and bust approach from a lifestyle point of view, but not really from a health perspective.
No, it doesn't really work in that sense. We can understand why people do it. It's understandable. You're working in the week and then you want to enjoy yourself the weekend, but it's not the approach that works well from a health point of view. So what we've done is we've devised a sort of middle ground, that gives us nights off so we feel virtuous and get that all-important restorative sleep we talked about, but it also allows us to indulge a little bit too.
No. And I think so you could call it the happy medium approach. Or I actually think about it, we could also use the acronym FOTO, because our approach is 4 on, 3 off. So 4 nights on the booze, 3 nights off in a week. Now, this doesn't necessarily, actually, most importantly, it's not in a row. So, you can fit this around what suits you best. But for example, we almost always have Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday nights off, and then we drink or taste or whatever on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday.
Yeah. And being really honest, I think we tend to drink a tiny bit more on the Friday and the Saturday.
We definitely do.
Both,
let's be honest.
Than we would on a Monday
really
or Wednesday,
to be
honest. Which might not be best from a rigorous health perspective, but, it just allows us that all-important kind of release at the end of the week, which we all enjoy, and I think actually a lot of us need. Especially when homeschooling has been involved.
But this is what I mean. We should say this sort of approach has really only been something we've done absolutely rigorously since lockdown, and it just works for us. It works really, really well, and I think we are drinking less. And actually, we know we're drinking slightly less because we've done an intake diary for you, John.
Two words to strike fear into the heart of any wine.
Oh my Lord, we've actually written down what we're drinking.
We did it for you, John. You made us do it.
So we can share how this works out.
Let's share
in terms of our overall consumption. So, come on. So the UK government, let's look at that. The UK government recommends no more than 14 units per week for women and men. It used to be 21 for men, but we're all down to 14 now. And just to clarify, 1 unit is 10 millilitres of pure alcohol.
Yeah, which just reminds me, we should point out at this stage to recommend Drinkerware as a really good website with loads of good, helpful information on. Yeah. If you're confused about what units are and how much is good, then drinkerware.com is a really good source.
Yeah. Anyway, we worked out that we drank just over 6 litres in 15 days, which averages out. Well, it sounds a lot, but we were quite excited about this because it averages out at 400 millilitres a day for both of us, which is approximately 2 units each per day. So 14 a week. Not bad. I bet this sounds like we've made it up, doesn't it?
It's a bit surprising.
Ridiculously surprising.
It sounds like a conversation with our GP, doesn't it? But actually, are you serious? It was about 14.
Yep. Right. Okay. So I'm gonna have to fess up here.
It sounds like we're cooking the books here.
Fess up here because you were ill. You were ill for at least 2 or 3 days, which meant you drank nothing at all. So it was only my intake that got put in there. There are obviously no parties at the moment. We don't have people around for supper at the weekends. There's no big work tastings. So to be fair, however smug we might sound about this with our 14, most weeks it would probably be higher.
I think almost
it would
certainly
definitely be higher.
But and not just most weeks, every week. But
so we need to think about that.
Let's not tell the doctor. But it is worth bearing. But it's interesting just to do that intake diary, isn't it? And I think actually, if you want to try, it's worth having a look at because it can be one interesting. You might find
I'm
less.
sure loads of people have done it already, but
But anyway, it does seem that this approach is working.
It works
for us, isn't it? And I think one of the things we've been trying to do is to savour the wine we do drink even more. I mean, this sounds simplistic, it might sound slightly patronising, but we're going to talk about no and low options, but actually just enjoying the wine you do drink, the full fat wine, if you like. Why, try and savour it as much as you can. And one way we do this bizarrely is we make sure when we're pouring ourselves a glass of wine, this is really simple, but we're also topping up or pouring another non-alcoholic drink alongside it every time. So we're big fans of sparkling water.
Here we go. Peter and his soda stream. We know you love your
I am in
soda
love.
Stream.
It's a mad passion.
Your favourite ever Christmas present, I think, isn't it?
I think it's one of my favourite ever Christmas presents.
It's very romantic.
It takes me back to my youth. But anyway, whatever works for you, really. But make sure you've got a non-alcoholic drink alongside that glass of wine, and then try to alternate, sips or glugs of wine with the alcohol-free alternative.
I mean, I think
it's quite simple.
I think particularly in that sort of end-of-day cooking supper moment of weakness, when you've finished work, you're just gagging for a glass. I think if you can get through that, you just naturally slow down with the meal, don't you?
And I think that's where we're coming on to, isn't it? What we drink on those all-important nights off. But that pre-dinner moment of weakness, I love that. Should be an acronym, shouldn't it? Mo.
My Mo moment.
My Mo moment. Because I think, life gets very boring if you don't have delicious things to look forward to, and more importantly, things that are delicious from a wine lover's perspective is what we really want to get into, isn't it? So what are they?
So we're going to do a tasting on that front, which should be fascinating and hopefully useful in terms of recommendations. But first, let's hear from Stuart Elkington. He's the founder and managing director of Dry Drinker. It's a company that claims to offer the UK's largest range of non-alcoholic beers, wines and spirits. Now, Stuart was a big wine and beer drinker and worked in the trade, but he's now been dry for 8 years. And I started by asking him why he set up Dry Drinker in the first place.
Dry Drinker came out of a bet, really. I was working for a pub company and my wife and I were trying for a family. And we'd been trying for about 3 years. And one of our friends recommended that we see a bit of an off-the-wall doc in London, which we kind of reluctantly went to see him. And basically he said, you're in your 40s. It takes a little bit of time, but do you know what? Why don't you just try two things? He said to me, look, if you stop drinking for 3 months, and then he said to my wife, if you drink a little bit more, I think we can get you relaxed and we can really get you sort of not focus on this baby thing and give it a go. So you can imagine, I thought he'd got the advice the wrong way around.
I was going to say.
So I walked out there quite shell-shocked, and
you got the short straw, didn't you? There.
Well, I can't. Well, listen, we were obviously desperate to have a family. We'd lived abroad, and yes, we probably did drink too much. And I said, yeah, no, look, I'll give it a go. And of course, in those 3 months, most people at work thought there was something wrong with me. This was sort of eight years ago now. Why aren't you drinking? And anyway, 3 months had gone by, and she fell pregnant. And from that moment on, it was kind of, you get into this sort of counting dates mode when you're kind of first time parents. You're waiting for 12 weeks, then 20 weeks, and then the baby's born, and then you don't know what you're doing for a year. And I kind of forgot I'd not drank for about a year, and it was quite a revelation, really. But I knew that actually when I did want that kind of moment, there wasn't really a selection out there. So we were on holiday in Spain, and I remember my wife was 5 months pregnant, and we drove to Spain, and we were sitting on this beach, and this guy came up to us from the hotel and said, "Would you like a beer?" I said, "Oh, what have you got?" He said, "Oh, I've got San Miguel on draft." So we were both sitting there. She was 5 months pregnant, having a couple of pints, thinking this is great. And really, and over a period of time at work, people used to say, have you stopped drinking? I used to say, oh, no, I drink dry. And then I kind of said, I don't like that word. So I flipped it to dry drinker, and I got a bit of a nickname within the company because I probably may have had a reputation for drinking. But anyway, so I was now the dry drinker, and that's how it all started. I thought there must be a lot more people than me that are just wanting to kind of not give up, but maybe change the way they drink, but I don't want to preach to anybody. I just wanted to kind of present the beers in the same way that the other alcohol drinks are presented. So that's kind of in a nutshell how it started.
So essentially, your wife got pregnant. You stopped drinking. She drank a bit more. She got pregnant.
She's still doing that today, though. I keep saying that advice is now 9 years old. You don't need to keep taking it.
Do you drink now?
No, funny enough, I never went back. It's so odd. I honestly thought that it was going to be for a short period of time, and there was no long-term plan. It was just how it happened, and I get what I kind of need now from alcohol-free beer, or whatever we're stocking, and it's quite a sometimes when I think about it, it does surprise me. But so, I've gone 8 years now, and I can honestly tell you, I just don't think I'll go back.
So you moved from working in the trade, as it were, the wine spirits trade, and then you set up you moved away from that, set up Dry Drinker. So 8 years on, how is business going? How is the no-low category?
Well, yeah, I'd stopped for 8 years, but actually Dry Drinker we're kind of 3.5 years old. So I kind of carried working on in the trade. And then at one point, you have that moment where every good idea you never do. And it's always the wrong time, isn't it? And actually, when we had our son, very quickly, we had our daughter. So we kind of, so actually, you have to put the line in the sand sometimes and say, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to, start my own business. So 3.5 years. Yeah, it's funny. We've obviously seen an explosion of alcohol-free products coming onto the market. And I think there's a lot more acceptance now of actually customers opening their minds to the fact there could be a different way of drinking. We really aim for drinkers, not non-drinkers, because most people that buy from us now, and certainly over the last year of going through the pandemic, people just want to blend their drinks. They like the alcohol-free option in the week, and then they can have, as they call it, a proper drink at the weekend.
So, and on that note, actually, what effect do you think lockdown has had? I mean, has it made people drink more? As you say, people probably got into a bit of a pattern, but are they actually drinking more no-lo, or is it less? Is it more alcohol, or just more of everything?
I think it's interesting. I think there was certainly as we found the first lockdown last March. I think there was a real kind of holiday feel around the first 4 weeks of everyone's at home. It was a real lockdown. You know, you could open that bottle of something at 4 o'clock possibly and shut the laptop a little bit earlier. And of course the weather was good. But we found then after that, our sales sort of grew phenomenally. And I think people were kind of thinking, crikey, we can't, if this goes on for another 3 months, we can't carry on like this. You know, is there another way? But I like the taste. And I think that's kind of, for us, where we had that phenomenal growth was kind of middle of March, beginning of April, where I think certainly when I was talking to my neighbours over the recycling, it was taking a bit longer than normal. So, you're thinking, crikey, this shouldn't take me half an hour. But so I think that's certainly for us when I think it was set into people's minds.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when you say the 3 months, you think, God, if it only had been 3 months. But what are your best selling products? What do people like the most?
So at the moment, what we're seeing is certainly we're seeing lots of new customers coming in, and I think what they're doing is really investing in their non-drinking. So we actually see, an average order they're trying some beers, they're trying some wines, they may be looking at the non-alcoholic spirit ranges. So, yeah, so they're really just dipping into those categories and actually saying, do you know what? If I'm going to do it, I'm not just going to stick with my boring, case of 12 beers. So, that's, and we're then seeing what they like when they come back and they can buy with confidence. So I must say that probably last year it was more of the kind of beer market. Obviously the summer and the good weather, did drive that, the lagers and the IPAs, but we are seeing lots more interest in alcohol-free wine. And we've certainly seen this dry January where actually that category is up about 30% on last year, where people are willing to give new categories a go.
Do you think that's because the wine is getting better? Because the beer and spirits non-alcohol market, those guys have done really well with product. When you look at the wine, it's lagged behind. Is that changing? Are there some better products now on the market, in your opinion?
Yeah, there certainly are, certainly from 3 or 4 years ago, and they're only getting better. I mean, wine drinkers, as an ex-wine drinker myself, the number one question we get is, I drink a 13% Malbec, what would you recommend? And I always say a 13% Malbec, because, I don't have a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. But I think, when the customer reads the product pages and understand they are going to lose something, the flavour is there, they actually take it for what it is. It's very Marmite, the kind of customer reviews. People absolutely rave about it and say, do you know what? I was really surprised. This is not bad. This is great. Or, of course, you get the other end of the spectrum, absolute rubbish, Ribena, tipped it down the drain. So I think once customers understand it's not a like for like, it's a different category, and I always say, look, I drink most of my alcohol-free wine with food, and that's where I get, most enjoyment and pleasure from it.
So we had, Stuart, we had a listener question. John, one of our listeners, he said he loves his wine, but he wants to drink less. What would be your tips to help him do that? And do you have any specific products that I know you sell a range of products, you probably prefer not to say you prefer one over the other, but are there some that you would really recommend?
Yeah, it's a great question. And do you know, when I started Dry Drinker, because I was a real beer lover, that's the thing that I really stuck with. And actually, at that time, I didn't want to introduce wine because I didn't think it was quite there yet to actually sort of put the stamp of approval. But so when I did, I wanted to make sure that some of the brands that we sell may not be familiar to UK customers. So we sell in singles. I always suggest to our customers, buy a range of reds and whites and build your own box to your own budget, and you will find one of your flavors, your favorites in that box. I do have my personal favorite, but the pre-mix cases we've kind of created to, with the customer and in mind, to give them a variety of grape and a variety of taste, so they will hopefully find a great red or a great white. So we've got wines that start at $6.99, and we have a sparkling that ends at $15.99. So hopefully we've got something in there that John will find and enjoy.
Now, do you know, that's an interesting one. Just picking up on the price point there. Do you feel that Nolo should be a sort of a premium priced product? Quite a few of the products tend to be quite highly priced, even though obviously they don't pay any alcohol duty. But do you think there certainly needs to be an element of aspirational pricing? So you think you're drinking something as special as a glass of wine?
Yeah, the pricing is interesting. Pricing generally across alcohol-free is an interesting point, and I kind of answer it that, there's still a process and a price to pay for making any drink, and just because it's alcohol-free doesn't mean it's any less than versus any other drink. And actually, the economies of scale are a lot less than their alcohol counterpart. So there's a little bit of there's a bit of cost to pay in there as well. I think, all of our wine that we stock, we have to import it from Europe and further afield, from the States or from Chile. So, there is a price to pay for quality. So that's why we try and have that kind of range. But you do pay for what you get in anything you buy. And I think how we've tried to price all our drinks is a reflection of the quality that we sell.
And just moving on, given the time of year that it is right now, dry January. What's your opinion of dry January?
I think it's a great introduction. I mean, I kind of do agree with people sometimes when they say it should be dry July, because January is pretty depressing anyway, isn't it? So we have to try and give up everything, and But I tell you what, we've had lots and lots of interest from new customers that just want to give it a go, and I think it's a great opportunity for people to try new things. And I know it's Try January and a vegan month as well. So I think, we've certainly seen a lot of people try it. There's obviously the other festivals that the Sober October and other things. I think it's a great way of showcasing what the alcohol-free community can do and what's out there, and certainly push it in a very positive way. And as I say, we just try and, we're a beer, wine and spirit company with just different numbers on the back, and without any preaching, and it's all about taste. So I think it's a positive thing, and if more people are trying to reduce their alcohol intake, then that can only be a good thing.
Do you think it should be a sort of more of a springboard then to a life that is based a little bit more on no and low, as opposed, because a lot of people argue, look, you shouldn't really just give up for a full month and then go straight back. It's far better to just gradually integrate into your whole life pattern a bit more no and low.
You're absolutely right. We as I previously mentioned that we call them the blenders, the kind of Monday to Friday alcohol-free warriors, and then they drink at the weekends. And, when I used to spend some time in Europe with our brands, they kind of laugh at us that we haven't kind of understood that start the night with a couple of alcohol-free, have a couple of pints, and then finish off with alcohol-free. So, I think you're right. It's just a great introduction to a new way of drinking, and actually showcasing products when there will be times when you can't drink, maybe, pregnancy, or, you may have been recovering from an illness, but you still miss that flavor, or just something, look, I've got an early start, but the football's on, I want a couple of pints. So there's obviously so many different reasons for how you drink and what you drink. And yes, you're right. It should be more of a showcase festival rather than a thou shalt not drink in January.
Now I'm gonna say that I will admit that my drink of choice when it comes to no low, so I'm going to confess here, is the Seedlip Grove 42 with an ice cube, a bit of orange zest, and cucumber tonic. So I'm going to admit that, Stuart. I need. What is your drink of choice?
I tell you what I've been really enjoying in January, because my wife is doing dry January. So I will be getting a text, I assume, as it's a Friday, don't forget my order. But we're actually really enjoying the Lies alcohol-free spirits, and we've really got into the American malt with a Fever Tree Cola. And actually, that's been a real change, because we can get a bit stale I am a beer lover through and through, so I kind of then sort of always hit the beers. But those spirits I've kind of got into, and something I didn't realize I missed was that, as you say in your drink, is that kind of pre-dinner drink, because I always used to have that when I was drinking. So actually reconnecting with some of the ready made drinks like the Clean & Co gin and tonic has been nice, and I can actually feel my appetite growing a little bit when I'm actually drinking it, waiting, while we're just chatting and dinner is on the stove, and it's kind of a really nice feeling after a long week, just to have that. Kids are in bed and just to have that moment.
Gets your taste buds going. Finally, Stuart, what do you think is the future for no and low?
I think it will just be part of what we do, and it will be accepted, accepted in our society, that we will see more and more alcohol-free options in every walk of life, in every sort of store, and will be ready, available, and it will be part of the culture. It will be, we're having nights off, or we'll have a couple of pints of alcohol-free beer at the local pub, and I think that the quality of drink will just be better. But that's it's when I tell my even the guys that work in the warehouse, when I tell them we used to smoke on planes, it's sort of that mind blowing, and we used to smoke in pubs. So I think it will just be part of who we are, and we will look at alcohol in a different way. We'll still enjoy alcohol, and we should enjoy alcohol, but again, it's how we can use that. We can sort of interweave alcohol-free with alcohol, and I think we'll learn to do that a lot, much better than we've previously done.
Stuart Elkington, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So a new way of drinking was what he said, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about it. It's not just no drinking; it's just a new way of drinking. And I think to a certain extent it's true, isn't it? It's partly, this whole thing is about mindset, especially at this kind of early stage of development in a lot of the drinks. You can't expect no and low wine just to taste like a normal wine. It's not that. You've got to kind of come at it from a different point of view.
Yeah, and I mean, he really does make a good point about customers needing to realise that it's not a like-for-like substitution, and that what's referred to as non-alcoholic wine should actually be considered just a different drink to normal wine. But it would be nice, wouldn't it? I mean, surely that would be the holy grail, an alcohol-free wine that tastes just like normal wine. Yes. Oh, can you imagine?
It's funny.
It possible?
You can think of it both ways, though, can't you? The gentle buzz that you get from alcohol is kind of part of the joy, the charm of wine. And apparently also part of its health-giving effect as well. The alcohol, it's not just the polyphenols, it's actually the alcohol in the wine can be part of the health-giving effect. Although it would be good to have the science clarified
I think we need
a bit more.
More
but that does seem
that.
to be the case, doesn't it? But generally, I agree. Wouldn't it be amazing on the nights off, you can have a no and low alternative to wine that tastes just as good, but doesn't have the booze.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem is, okay, with beer, you're taking out, say, 4 to 5% alcohol. With wine, if you're trying to de-alcoholize it, you're taking out 12 to 14%, and it's hard to make that balance work. I mean, in wine, the key components that make up a balanced taste are alcohol, fruit, acid, tannin in red wines. I mean, if you take out one of those key pillars, you're going to fundamentally affect the balance, and you don't just want to replace that with sugar, because that changes the taste. I mean, not to mention making it less healthy.
Yeah, but I mean, they can make it work with the spirits or so-called spirits, the distillates, like Seedlip, for example.
But you've got mixes added in.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, but equally, that's not. But, with something like Seedlip, it was a new product, a new category. So it shows what can be achieved with a bit of imagination and creativity, doesn't it? So, I think it's generally true to say that the beer and alcohol-free spirits, or whatever you want to call them, have been way ahead of wine in terms of product development.
Definitely.
So what would be really interesting to see is what happens now with wine in the next, say, decade or two.
Yeah.
Especially given, if you think back to where alcohol-free beer was 10 or 20 years ago, and how far it's come, since.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We got to the stage now where AB InBev, one of the biggest giant
brewers,
beer makers, is forecasting it will be 20 no alcohol beer will be 20% of profits by 2025. That's massive.
Yeah. Anyway, so at this point, and just before our tasting, I think it would be good to hear very briefly from a producer of no and low wine. Sinzero is a new Chilean brand making sparkling white and red no low wines that have actually really impressed us, haven't they?
Yep.
And since Cecilia Pratt is their commercial director.
That's right. Yeah, Cecilia has a long history in the wine trade, but then she became fascinated by the potential of the no and low market. And this was an interview I recorded last year, and it's just a snippet, but it's well worth the listen. I asked Cecilia what the secret to making good no and low wine is.
The main issue to have a good product is to have a good wine behind it. Mm-hmm. Okay, we cannot get a good alcohol-free product if the main or the mother wine is regular or is not good. For example, the Cabernet Sauvignon that we choose, it was from the Maipo Valley. The quality of the Cabernet Sauvignon from Maipo is much more appreciated than the, for example, Central Valley. And the Maipo Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, we also used blend. It has 4 months in French oak barrels. 20% of the blend has been 4 months in French oak barrel. So the quality behind that wine is, at least in cost, I think 20% superior than the regular wines.
Now, this is an important point, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people in the past have said, well, if we're going to do non-alcoholic wines, why use top grade wines? Let's save that for the normal wine. And for the non-alcoholic wine, we'll use just basic stuff. Now, it's been obvious that the results have been catastrophic. I mean, they just haven't tasted very nice. Now, you're saying you're using premium quality fruit. So not just Chilean Cabernet, Central Valley Cabernet, it's this Maipo Cabernet, which is a really well-known area for Cabernet. And then you're aging it in oak barrels, which is another expense. And when I tasted it, that came through in the wine. It tasted like Maipo Cabernet, and it tasted like Maipo Cabernet with oak, which was wonderful. But then the question is, what are you doing really? The alcohol, when you take alcohol out of wine, it really does leave a hole in the flavour, in the palate profile. And the last thing you want to have to do is to resort to lots and lots of sugar. Now, sugar is the one thing that you can replace a little bit of mouthfeel with. What are you doing in that sense? Because you're also making sparkling wine as well, aren't you?
Yes. Well, we basically, the difference is that we use just natural products, Peter. We use concentrate grape must to correct the acidity, but we do not add any other things. The mother wine has to be, or the original, that has to be good. And what I'm saying to the people is, you cannot expect to have the skimmy milk is not the same as the creamy milk. So you have to go with the idea that the products are different. So
for you, it's important that consumers recognize that they're not going to replicate, they're not going to have the taste of a normal wine. This is different context.
Yeah, different. The idea is that it's a complement. We're always saying that this is a complement to the wine industry. We do not want to be a competitor. What we want is the people that today is drinking Coke or is drinking a beer, wants to drink a wine, and they have the possibility to drink it without the alcohol. But we don't want to compete with the enormous amount of wines that are quite good in the world. We want to be a complement of that. And the idea is only to have natural products inside, not replace the volume of the alcohol. You will never have it.
can't expect skinny milk to taste the same as creamy milk.
Brilliant. Love the way she says that.
Good way of looking at it. And of course, you can always treat yourself, can't you, to the odd bit of full-fat wine in our approach?
Yeah, absolutely. We can indeed. We wanted to get into the alternatives now, though, didn't we? So, and one wine that did impress us was Sinzero, wasn't it? And that was why we set up the call with Cecilia.
Yeah.
You know, particularly the red.
The red, yes.
Exactly.
I was going to say the
Funny
red,
enough,
yeah.
Which, you know, isn't a style that naturally, excuse me, I must be, my throat's gone dry because of all these dry drinks.
The dry drinker.
Particularly the Maipo Cabernet. It actually tasted like Maipo Cabernet.
Yeah, which I know that sounds a silly thing to say, but it is quite surprising because
really
so few non-alcohol or de-alcoholized wines do taste like wine.
You know,
so
and the fizz was all right.
Fizz
as well,
was good
it?
too.
You know, a little bit
yes,
sour, but at least it was dry.
Yeah.
Anyway, both of those are about £9.49 at the Dry Drinker. But although I have checked the website, and it doesn't seem that Dry Drinker's got the red at the moment. So fingers crossed they might get it back in. But you can look out elsewhere.
Clearly, it's too popular.
It could be, yeah.
But yes, Cecilia's point about sourcing good quality, expensive wine to make the Cabernet was really telling, wasn't it? It's almost like until now, a lot of producers have perhaps used pretty basic quality grapes to make these wines.
I think that's been.
But, it stands to reason that producers using top quality fruit will make much better no and low wines. So I reckon, I reckon we need Bollinger or Chateau Petrus or Ridge or whoever to start doing trials. Imagine what that could lead to.
Romani Conti. No, I see that would be
that would be
something.
Oh dear,
it? You know,
that's heresy.
Imagine where it would go. We'd love to see that. You know, because often with wines, what you do get. So just to very basic explain, you know, wine is not grape juice. The transformation between grape juice and wine is a transformation not just involving alcohol, but it's also a flavour transformation. So if you try and make no alcohol from grape juice, it doesn't taste like wine because it hasn't had that transformation. So what people have to do is ferment, because you don't just get the alcohol from the fermentation, you get those complex flavours that make wine, and then take out the alcohol. But the problem is the process of taking out that alcohol often leaves you with this. It's quite identifiable, isn't it?
It is an odd...
It's sort of raw pastry smell.
Yeah, wet cardboard.
Exactly. It's that kind of just, and once you notice it, you can't stop.
That's the problem, is that once you've identified it, you go, I can smell it everywhere. That's one of the challenges that people need to do. Yeah.
But I think starting with good quality wine would be a really good,
Yeah, because I mean, we've tasted a lot of low and no stuff over the last few years, and a lot of it is hard to drink. And to be fair, as we've said, wine is still quite a long way behind beer and spirits in the no and low sector. But it is changing. It's changing all the time. And I think partly because there's so much interest from producers to invest and to get it right, that the best thing I think you can keep doing as a consumer of these drinks is to just keep looking for new products, because there are new ones all the time. And at a basic level, my top tip would be try as many as you can find. Really,
I think it's worth it. You know, so and I think with that in mind, there are certain styles that suit no and low alcohol better than others, aren't there? You know, so things like fizz, sparkling wine, and rosé seem to be two styles that work well for wine.
In our experience, yes.
Reds and whites are a bit harder. It's not to say like with the Sinzero, you can't get it right. But, you know, I think of the wines we've tasted, the ones we'd say which are pretty decent, good enough to recommend, are sort of Adnams have a good 0.5% Garnacha rosé.
They do Adnams.
Freixenet Leggero, which is about
so the carbon
5 or 6 quid at Morrison's or Ocado is okay. Torres Sangre de Toro White, which is about 5 quid at Majestic, is decent as well.
Also, actually, what we've tried recently was this. I've got the bottle here, Einspire which is Leitz, a German producer, and so they make a Riesling that they call Einspire Dry, because it's a dry Riesling. But then they've brought out this Leitz Einspire Zero, which it's got really nice packaging. I'm just going to pour myself a little bit here, and it's got it's very refreshing. It's very sort of green apple, and you know, it doesn't taste exactly like wine, but it is very citric, clean, fresh. If you want just something to uplifting and as an alternative, I think this is a good one. It's about $6.99 at Waitrose.
I'm feeling very refreshed having had that mouthful. It's, you know, you can also get it in cans, which is quite fun as well now. I think
actually
there's a
you can,
But,
and there's fizz as well.
There's a pretty decent sparkling wine, which is about 10 quid at Jeroboam's and Waitrose, which is well worth trying as well. So, and I had a long chat to him
Johannes Leitz?
Johannes, he's a lovely, slightly mad guy. Absolutely brilliant though, and he's put a lot. And he was grumbling about how he's worked his ass off in his terminology to sell his normal Riesling, and he's got so far. But actually,
how many years has he been doing that?
In a long time. In a very few years, his non-alcoholic Riesling has gone through the roof, and he hasn't really tried to sell it at all. So it's quite an interesting. It shows you how popular these drinks, how much demand there is for it.
Yeah.
And okay, so I think one obvious point to make about wines. If you want to stick within the wine arena, just look for naturally lower alcohol wines is another approach to do. So, for example, an off-dry German Riesling, a Hunter Valley Semillon, I don't know, a Chilean Pais. There are lots of options and lots of places you can find those recommended. Cooler climate wines.
I was going to say in general,
exactly.
If you go to cooler climate, you're much more likely to get just a slightly lower alcohol.
Naturally less alcohol, exactly. Yeah. So think about cool climate places around the world.
I mean, we're not talking here about 4% or anything. We're still talking wine. Wine, if you're going to call it wine, it needs to be 8%.
I think legally it's 8%, isn't it? Unless derogations exist. But you can also, there are some really interesting halfway houses at the moment, aren't there? Like things like the Doctor's brand from New Zealand.
So these are New World people.
These
New
are
Zealand.
New Zealand. John Forrest, he is doctor, hence the term. He's developed ways to reduce the alcohol naturally, which is really, really interesting. Both working in the vineyard, mainly working in the vineyard actually. And the doctor has really good Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir. So if you see that, do try it. It's quite a striking label. Ones we tried recently, wasn't it? Was the Brancott Estate Flight Sauvignon Blanc at 9%.
So again, New Zealand.
Yeah, and which I tried that one as part of my lighter wines for drinking recommendations piece for Decanter magazine, didn't I?
You did,
which is actually, funny enough, an article thinking about it, which has loads of relevant tips here. We're talking about cool climate, lower alcohol.
So they were
wines.
all 12% and below, weren't they?
That's right.
So Decanter light wines for summer drinking.
I will put that on the show notes so you can see that article and some sort of naturally lighter wines for recommendation.
But at the moment, obviously, we said we'd look properly low alcohol stuff. So here, so we are talking 0.5% or less, ideally 0%. So beyond the wines we've just mentioned, what else? Not necessarily wines. What else have we found that we liked? What have you got there?
I am just going to pour something here.
Oh,
just
we
a little
like this,
hint. Here we go. There we go. It's a very elegant bottle, which looks like champagne. This is the Fortnum & Mason Sparkling Tea.
It's really nice, isn't it?
And it's blended from a fine selection of organic black, white, green teas, is what it says. It's all right, isn't it?
Well, I liked it for its exuberance. It's quite exotic. There was some sort of lemongrass and kaffir lime leaf about it, so really quite exotic. It's dry. It doesn't have loads of weight in your mid palate. It doesn't have a great finish, but it's just very easy, dry, fizzy. It's
quite
drinking.
joyous. It's really aromatic.
Yeah,
as you say, it's almost sort of jasmine-y. But not in a bad way.
Yeah.
And then it is quite dry, and you've got a little bit of tannin from the tea.
Yeah.
So it feels quite sort of, there's that little bit of bitterness you get.
And, I would say for summer as well, particularly, that's a lovely drink. It's a bit expensive, was our only
what is
problem
it?
with it. $16.50. Bit expensive. I think that's too expensive. It depends how you look at it.
The pricing issue is a big one when it comes to this stuff. I think, it is true. Seedlip has shown us, if you need to feel special. If you're going low, you want to feel special. So,
but at the same time, you
spending
want
a bit is fine.
Yeah.
You don't want this. If this was at £2, you'd think, that's just,
I think maybe it could sit more happily around 10.
What do we think in terms of 10?
10,
I'd say 8 to 10 would be better for this.
Anyway, moving on. With another product.
Before you move on with that, just one point. I do just worry, and I might be massively misinformed here, but if I'm having this drink of an evening, I would be a little bit worried about caffeine. Does this have caffeine in it or not? I mean, I assume it would, but I don't know. Anyway, it's just a worry with the tea-based, options.
Yeah.
I don't want to be having massive amounts of caffeine before I go to bed, for example, if I'm having this in the evening.
So this is something we need to look into.
I don't know.
We need to look into. We'd have to ask the question.
But it is a really nice drink and a really nice alternative. Yeah.
So another not brand new, but quite new product is a Duke's Cordialities. These are really imaginative, intriguing. They're actually the brainchild of a fellow wine writer and colleague of ours, Matthew Jukes. So what these are, to try and explain, tiny little bottles, 30 milliliter bottles.
They're weenie, aren't they?
They're weenie. I've got one here. Just little bottles, and they are full of a little cordial. Matthew's numbered them. Number 1, which is white. Number 2, which is the bright red, and number 6, which is the red. And what you do is you mix half the bottle. You can mix the whole bottle, but half the bottle with 125 mils of of either still water or sparkling water, or if you want to, tonic, and they're made from all natural ingredients. What they're based on is an apple cider vinegar and brown sugar mix. Mm-hmm. So you get a bit of that, so the acidity from the vinegar and also a little bit of warmth in your throat, and you get the sugar to give you a little bit more sort of texture. So this is aiming to be an alternative to wine, isn't it? Particularly when you mix with a still water.
Exactly. If you mix it with sparkling water, it can almost be like a sparkling wine. Yeah. But actually, we found it was really interesting because not many solutions are still. A lot of no and low options are actually fizzy.
Yes.
So and obviously what you like about wine is you can sit down and I don't know about you, but the gassy stuff, the fizzy stuff is great as an aperitif. But actually, when you sit down with a meal, you tend to want something that's not sparkling. Want something, most usually. So it's nice to have that option here.
I mean, they've got a little bit of a vinegary note to them, which might be slightly off-putting.
I think that's a personal thing. If you react against that, you're very sensitive to it. They can be quite vinegary.
Yeah, but what we loved actually, I think one of our favourite options was to mix the bright red with tonic and have it as an aperitif, and it was really nice.
Yeah, that's really enjoyable. It was really joyful and kind of summery and so
dukescordialities.com for those.
Yeah, and they're about £35.
£35 for 9 bottles. So that would be
a pack of 9 bottles. They're very smart.
Drinks.
They come in a very smart
box. They look great.
It's about 18 drinks, isn't it? You know, they are tiny, but yes. So there we go. I wanted to mention Acorn Bitter.
Ah, yeah.
It's okay. So it's a spin-off from Seedlip, but made with English wine grapes grown in Sussex. Apparently, they're not fermented, so it's not a sort of wine in that sense. But it is, I think, targeted at wine drinkers. So it's unfermented English wine grapes, aromatized with herbs and botanicals, and there's various different flavors. But
I was going to say our favorite was the bitter, wasn't it?
Yeah. Which it's got kind of fruity cherry, almost kind of oaky character, orange peel as well. It's sort of like a vermouth, but you put it with a little bit of sparkling water, almost like a spritz, and it's really quite nice. I think a lot of the times when we're trying to recreate wine, it is that element of bitterness, or elegant bitterness, and not too sweet, which is really, really key. And I think that does it really pretty well. It's about £20 for 50 centilitres from Waitrose.
And I think that's why beer has done well, because it's not sweet. None of the beers that we've tried, the non-alcoholic beers, are sweet. We tried one just recently, unlimited beer.
Got one here,
we've got one, a bottle of it, which was great. And really, when you smell it, when you initially taste it, it's just so like an alcoholic beer. To be fair here, we're talking about unlimited, and I think it's about £2.30 a bottle, isn't it?
Yeah, about that, £2.50.
There are lots of beers. I mean, beer is the way to go if you really want choice.
We can't really go into it here, and we're not beer experts, but we do like a good beer.
There's loads. I mean, just Google them.
Yeah. I mean, one of the way we did try we talked to the founder of Big Drop. Didn't we? And we tried we really loved their IPA and brown ale.
Yes.
I think they're 0.5%, but James Kindred, who's the founder, said they actually use lactose to get the mouthfeel and help boost the flavour. And they're working on a vegan alternative as well. But that's just one idea about how you can use techniques to make these drinks work. Small beer is another really good name, isn't it? But as you said, to be fair, I
think we shouldn't really mention 2 or 3 because there are tons of them, aren't there?
UNLTD was really, it's a new one, and it was really, really
really enjoyable.
We'll put photos up on the show notes.
Finally, I just wanted to mention again my favourite, which is Seedlip at the moment. Seedlip Grove. For me, what works about this, Seedlip Grove 42 is one of 3 Seedlips. I love it with cucumber tonic, as I said in my interview with Stuart, with ice and just a sort of a slice of orange zest. And it is just such a great drink. And I genuinely look forward to that on my nights off.
Yeah, which is really
perhaps
important.
Not as much as a glass of wine.
No, but you need to find something that works for you.
But it's got a lovely orangey feel. It's bitter. You put it with some tonic. And I personally love cucumber, so that cucumber tonic works really well. It's
so
refreshing.
I have it with normal
tonic.
Which
so it is one of my favourites.
It works for both, and also we did try it with Caleño, which is another kind of take on the Seedlip.
A little bit more tropical, isn't it?
That was almost like if you wanted to imagine yourself on your desert island or in Hawaii, you bar in the Caleño because you get that sense of tropicality. Anyway, but that's the one the Seedlip with tonic is actually the one we that's our go-to, isn't it? Really?
It is our go-to. Yeah.
So I mean, there's so many of these drinks coming on stream.
There are lots.
Stuart mentioned
just try.
Yes, keep an eye out for all these things. I mean, we're often putting stuff out on our social media, so keep an eye out for that. But can I just end this mini tasting with Hugh Johnson's famous words, which I quote in my article on this. He just said, "I drink spritzers, and no one seems to mind."
I just love that image of Hugh drinking.
There we are, John.
spritzers.
Another solution for you. You know, do our happy medium photo 4 on 3 off approach, and enjoy your full fat wines, but also have time off in between.
Absolutely,
or do the Hugh Johnson approach, whatever.
And I just wanted to go back to some stats actually, just out of interest really for our listeners. The KAM stats, KM stats, 98% of people who switched to no and low in 2020 have said they will continue to do so in 2021. So it looks like lockdown habits are, to some extent, going to endure. I mean, I think the biggest fear people have about trying no and low products is that they're not going to like the taste. So if we can keep moving towards better and better taste with the producers that are making these drinks, then people don't have a problem with drinking them. It's just they want something that tastes good.
It definitely seems to be a trend that's going to grow and grow. So it's something definitely to look into. And I'm sure we're going to get more and more super tasty things, out there. But it is, I mean, I saw something from Fact.mr, market intelligence company, saying that the no and low wine market, no and low wine,
not drinks, wine,
not just drinks, wine, $10 billion by next year.
Wow.
Actually, by this year.
By the end of this year.
So, it's going to grow and grow.
Gosh.
It's worth checking out.
Yeah,
especially for us wine lovers looking to just moderate a little bit.
So, John, on which note, I hope we've managed to answer your question about how to drink less, but not sacrifice the flavour or enjoyment. I think we've given you a few options, ideas there. And the key is always just to find what works for you and go with that, obviously. It could even be a lockdown project, trying new things, shaking up your drinking patterns and habits, just finding a new approach or your own happy medium.
Yeah, well said. And don't forget good resources like DrinkAware. Most countries have got some helpful resources on this front. We're also going to put that article I wrote for Decanter, which I mentioned on this subject, on our show notes. So there's more info on there and recommendations as well. And you can expect more from us on this subject in due course. I'm not going to say what exactly, but we have some plans.
We do indeed. So thanks to John for the question, to Stuart Elkington and Cecilia Pratt, and thanks to you for listening. Please do leave a positive rating or review, even though we've gone skinny on you.
We've let you down.
That's it. Anyway, happy drinking, stay safe, and cheers.